the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and great to have Bill Bennett back in the studio. How are you, Bill?
I'm good, Paul.
Excellent. Maybe you can remind listeners where you fit into this big wide world of tech and journalism in New Zealand.
Oh, I've been a journalist for more than 40 years now, covering business and technology for most of that time. And I still do some journalism here. I still have my own website, which covers telecommunications and some technology news. And I still write stuff for the Herald and do things for Radio New Zealand and a few other bits and pieces around the place.
Well, great to have you back on the show. Always a privilege and always fun to catch up because I really value your insights and thoughts on what's going on in the tech world. Before we jump in, a big thank you to our show partners, 1NZ, Spark, 2 Degrees, HP, and Gorilla Technology. Well, first up, we do have a telecommunications related topic. So we'll start with the sort of New Zealand specific news. Although in some ways this isn't so specific to New Zealand. Depending on how deep we go into this rabbit hole, Bill, and I know we've got some other topics, so we probably can't go too far, but we know that in New Zealand our mobile networks are shutting down their 2G and their 3G networks, but we're still, I don't know, roughly a year off until those things are shut down. But it's moving a whole lot quicker in some other markets, and it's a really important warning for those who are traveling or they've got family traveling to recognize that if you or a family member is expecting to get off the plane in Australia, you carry an older or a simpler phone that's limited to 2G and 3G connectivity, then you might get a little bit of a shock very soon, because we've already got some of the networks in Australia basically yesterday, Telstra and Optus shutting down of 3G networks, and then the other two networks, well, they've previously closed their 3G networks, right? So so it's kind of all over on that front. But if you were to look out more globally, Australia is not the only country doing this.
No, but Australia is generally fast into these things. I mean, Australia got rid of it cleared the 700 megahertz spectrum earlier than everyone else. And the other thing the Australians did, which we didn't do, is when the fibre went in Australia, as fibre went into a street, they switched off the copper networks. Now, we've just closed our first copper exchange 13 years after the first fibre went in. And it's partly because Australia is kind of brisk and efficient, or you could say brutal about these things. There's no sort of consultation period or anything over there. It's just, we're going to do it and get on with it. And that's very much the way they operate. When they came to getting rid of 3G, I think somewhere between 15 and 20% of people, when they started thinking about this, still had those phones. So it's not a huge amount. And I'm guessing here in New Zealand, it'll be roughly that same percentage. And I'm also going to guess that percentage is probably not going to overlap that much with the kind of people that are going to be flying around the world. It's going to be the people that are stuck with the older technology are generally going to be the people that are a bit more perhaps rural or older or whatever.
Kiwis do, quite commonly go across the ditch to visit family and so on.
Of course they do.
And some of those people are, won't necessarily even know whether their phone's 3G
but it's coming
or
here
not,
too,
right?
of course.
So yeah.
So people need to start preparing, because I think, as you say, it's about a year away before we're going to start doing the same thing. And like I said, probably 15%, maybe 20% of people will have those phones still. So it's a minority. But in some cases, I mean, I've got a friend who I haven't spoken to this friend for ages, but I remember that when BlackBerry stopped business, they went out and bought 4 BlackBerries with keyboards. You know, because they just love that phone with the keyboard.
Yeah.
Well, their phones are obsolete now. So buying 4 seemed a smart move at the time. And I remember him saying, this means that in the future I won't have to stop using my BlackBerry. Well, you will, mate, because the network's gone. So yeah, it's a reminder that things are going to move on like that at quite some pace, and you've got about a year to prepare to get rid of those 3G phones. And to be fair, those phones are starting to time out anyway. I mean, you'll find that. I've actually got one in my pocket right now for reasons we were discussing before we came onto the podcast, and it doesn't have this year's software updates. In fact, it doesn't have last year's software updates. It's now 2 years. It's getting security updates still.
I've exfiltrated all your data while you've been sitting here, Bill.
Yeah,
need to worry about that.
No, it is getting security updates, but it's not getting the OS updates.
Yes, yeah.
And so I would recommend that people should start to think about getting rid of 3G phones about now anyway, regardless of Australia switching off.
It's good advice, and there are other issues in the way that the lower networks, especially 2G, operates, and we talked about that, some weeks back, in terms of the individual who had bought a device, basically a cell site to broadcast text messages out, and
yes.
part of how that was able to happen was by interfering with the sort of 3G to 5G type signals, and then pushing the comms back down to 2G and so on. So some complexities in there behind the scenes, but yeah, good point. But we do need to be aware this is happening. It's coming to New Zealand as well. But if you've got a family member who's traveling, and there are other implications as well, without diving in too deep, I was surprised to get a communication passed to me via somebody in the in the sort of security sector, who was advising somebody they should get rid of their Ethernet internet connectivity to their alarm system and replace it with a GPRS system. That would be much better, because then you're not going to get any issue with the wireless dropping out or your internet dropping out. Of course, the flip side to that is the GPRS network is a 2G network that's that's not what you should be investing in these days. Now onto other topics. Apple have been rolling out their new operating system. So iOS,
18.1.
18.1 now.
Yeah.
We're a few months in with iOS 18. One of the things that brings, and there's a bunch of things in there. One of the things that we were sort of expecting it to bring, but you have to sort of pay close attention with some of these international firms in terms of, well, where does New Zealand fit in terms of the rollout, is some of the AI capabilities, US English at this point.
I looked at that this morning.
Yeah.
I tried to switch it on. It said, no, you have to turn from New Zealand English to US English. The problem with doing that is everything turns from New Zealand to the US. And because I was coming here, I thought I don't have all day to play around with this. I thought I'll leave that for another, for a rainy day perhaps.
But it's not coming. It's not too far off.
It's December.
December is when we will get it, and it's not just New Zealand. It's New Zealand and Australia. So I always feel a little bit more comfortable when we're at least aligned with
the same. So I think it's all the other English-speaking nations.
Yeah. So that's coming. But one of the things that really caught my attention is Apple effectively getting into hearing testing and hearing aids. So with the AirPods Pro 2 and these new updates that are rolling out now, you will actually be able to do a hearing test yourself between your phone and the AirPods Pro 2. Now, when I tried it today, the room I was in had a bit too much background noise and whatever else was going on here in the studio. But obviously fine for recording a podcast. Maybe it was you making too much noise, Bill. I'm not sure. I don't think there was much noise going on.
I think it's the aircon.
Yeah, it might be the air conditioning, which of course our mics are able to tune out, but they're looking for complete silence. But you can basically run through and do this hearing test. Now, it is specific to the AirPods Pro 2, and it's to do with the way that they have a little seal in between the AirPods and your ear. And for it to work, you've also got to get the right attachment, because I think you get, is it 3 or 4 different sizes. So if you are wanting to try out that capability, and look, it's a lot cheaper than probably going for a formal ear test, but they are saying, look, this is actually a clinical grade hearing test. Then you might want to spend the whatever it is, $20 if you find that the little rubber insert bit is not the right size. So it will actually the
pods come with all the sizes.
But if you've lost them, right? So in my case, where it was like, I got those a year or two back, and I'm like, where are those little rubber bits? I put them somewhere, and maybe they're not too far. But if you've mislaid them, like I sometimes do, then that's something to consider. But basically, it'll tell you whether you're getting the right fit, and then once you've got the right fit, then not only have you got the hearing test capability, but you've also got the ability to use the AirPods Pro 2 as hearing aids. And interestingly, the sort of price range of hearing aids is not particularly cheap if you're looking at good ones. So this could be quite a boon for folks.
It's going to be a huge boon. It's of particular interest to me because earlier this year, when I had another dose of COVID, and I temporarily lost the hearing in one ear, and it still cuts out occasionally. I had my hearing tested at that time, and I don't need hearing aids, but sometimes the hearing goes in my right ear. So something which is like a mild, occasional hearing aid perhaps would be helpful. Although I'm told by the specialist that probably as the summer wears on, that will just fade away and it won't be a problem anymore. But the thing is that I think there's lots of people who are in that kind of position where they're not really hearing aid, not ready to put in hearing aids or whatever, but they have some minor problem. It's a bit of an irritation. And we've got these AirPods anyway, so let's use them for it. It's for that point of view, it's great.
Yeah, and look, the number of people with hearing loss is actually pretty significant. I'm trying to remember what the figures were, but in terms of the global population, it's a really big number of the population that has a level of hearing loss. So the idea of using the technology to help check, have I got a hearing loss issue, and then potentially use those AirPods Pros to help you in those situations where you might need hearing aids is pretty impressive.
Paul, I spent my teenage years right down the front in front of rock bands pretty much 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah.
I'm surprised my hearing is still quite good, to be honest.
Yes, and I have to put up my hand and admit a bit of time around a bit of electronic music over a period of years, and these things we're warned that it's not good for your hearing.
Yeah.
But often the impact doesn't necessarily come until later on. So nice to have something that's not at those crazy price points. And I think there's also something to be said for the the sort of visual element, wearing an AirPod is not an unusual thing, but I think some people are probably a little bit cautious around wearing hearing aids because they're concerned around the there being a stigma or the look of it. Now there shouldn't be, but that is something for some people, and they'll be maybe a bit more relaxed.
It might make
to
people
wear
feel a bit vulnerable
typical
as well.
Consumer electronics, right?
I mean, you may look vulnerable if you're wearing them as well, which is the other thing. And the other thing, of course, is that they have other functions, whereas the hearing aid's a hearing aid, whereas AirPods. Do you know the thing that I love about my AirPods, right, is when the mowing contractor comes round, I can just stick the AirPods in and I
noise
can't hear
cancelling and away you go.
Yeah,
right?
I can't hear the lawnmowers going.
Yeah. So, some good things. And look, this is part of where we get those benefits of improving consumer electronics. So, I got some data here saying nearly 20% of the global population live with hearing loss, and so that's pretty significant. And of course, a large portion of those don't have hearing aids. If you don't see 1 in 5 people walking around with hearing aids. So making these a bit more accessible is encouraging. And look, good on Apple for pushing this along. I haven't heard of anyone else doing it, and so if there is, it's certainly Apple that have really got the attention on this front. Also on the Apple front, one of the new features with iOS 18 that I hadn't noticed, but when reconnecting the AirPods Pro 2, I got the little reminder that now with iOS 18 and those AirPods, also I think the AirPods 4, you can nod or shake your head to receive or decline a call. So there you go. Not sure anyone was asking for that, but sometimes these little things you get used to very quickly, and that becomes a part of how you operate. Now this week also on the Apple front, we've got new iMacs announced today, and across the week we will see a range of new Mac announcements. So the full sort of public details, of course, be easy to track down online.
I think the iMac was pretty much waiting for an upgrade, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yep. And look, when it comes to the MacBooks, those have been very sort of consistent with their updates. The iMac maybe not quite so much, but it's all about their new M4 chip, which of course is about improved performance, their neural processing unit or capability, which helps with local AI, and of course, as well as the mobile devices being able to deliver artificial intelligence type capabilities built in. That's also rolling through on the Macs as well.
The other thing I noticed when I looked at the press release this morning is, off the top of my head, I didn't make the exact comparison, but it looked to me that the pricing for the iMacs is roughly in line with similarly equipped MacBooks. So there's not a premium for one or the other. They're more or less the same price. I mean, there might be a couple of $100s in it, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and look, worth mentioning that Apple have lifted their base spec to 16 gigs of RAM rather than 8 gigs. I think we've probably talked about that previously. Microsoft have done the same with their Surface range. I think that's a very helpful move, because it was a little bit painful that the base models actually just didn't really have a sufficient amount of RAM.
Well, the thing about Apple kit, and it goes for a lot of the big names as well, is you should never really buy the base model anyway. There's always something flawed with the base model.
It's a challenge, isn't it? Well, I would argue that for a lot of people, the base model now is potentially quite good.
Oh, it would be now.
That said, I'm more of a fan for a MacBook that's sort of portable these days, rather than an iMac with the 24-inch screen. I like to have the flexibility of picking a nice big ultra wide screen and all those sorts of things.
Oh,
right?
well, let me tell you, right, the iMacs are great for running a digital audio workstation.
Perfect. There you go.
Yeah, you've got Logic Pro, an iMac. It's great.
Are you offering to share some of your music with listeners, Bill? Are you putting that up on your website?
It's on SoundCloud.
Okay. So listeners, are you curious to hear some of the beats, some of the music that Bill's putting together? Go and see if you can track it down on SoundCloud. Are you going to give us any more hints what to look for?
No, I will. I'll be public before too long.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Bill. Now, on to other topics. Meta have indicated they're restarting facial recognition to tackle celebrity scams. Now, there was a window of time where it was very common for facial recognition to be used in varying apps, and then there was a bit of a kind of pullback, and it's kind of been a bit of to and fro on some of those fronts. We have things like surveillance cams, the Nest cams that Google sell, which were using facial recognition, and I think still are. We had Ring, who it seems like they got very close to a facial recognition feature, and then because of some mistakes they made and some negative press around that sort of capability, they stopped from launching, as far as I recall. So, there are these moves sort of backwards and forwards when it comes to privacy and the downsides of facial recognition. But they say they're going to trial the technology again, capturing or covering 50,000 public figures, comparing their profile photos with scam ads to block fraudulent content. So an example of that fraudulent content might be the situation that we've heard about in media in recent weeks, which was someone who lost their life savings after, in this case, seeing a video that said it looked like it was Christopher Luxon, used his likeness, his voice, and was trying to convince people to buy crypto through a particular channel. This particular person got sucked in and went ahead and ended up having all of their accounts drained over a period of time by giving somebody access to their computer, I think, or by at least by continuing to transfer funds, even when they were I think they maybe took a call or some advisory from the bank and even from Easy Crypto, challenging them around what they were doing. So there was the positive that sort of came out of that, in terms of my thinking, was that even the crypto company locally is actually looking out for oddities and warning people. But very sad to see someone's got sucked in with this. This to me sort of seems to fit in that sweet spot of where having some sort of facial recognition around public figures is at the softer end than having everybody's facial recognition kind of data. How do you feel about it, Bill?
Well, look, it's good to see Meta or Facebook taking some responsibility. I mean, too often they don't take responsibility when they really should.
I have to agree with that one.
Sorry?
I have to agree with that one.
And for that, that they've got to be applauded. The problem is facial recognition. Look, just about every technology that's ever happened, from the moment someone sitting in a cave learned how to make fire, it can be used for good and it can be used for bad, right? Just about everything. And the problem with a lot of these modern ones is it seems to be that the bad stuff seems to come first almost, or it seems to take precedent over the good stuff. So look, I think it's great that they're taking some responsibility. I can't see any possible potential abuse that could happen because of this particular program. But on the other hand, it can be a way of seeding the acceptance of a technology which does have its abusive uses. So I think, yeah, great, but let's be a bit wary about what happens next.
Yes, I think caution is appropriate, and often it's not necessarily obvious in the initial instances how I guess the latest technology can have a negative or a darker side to it. So we do need to keep considering these things and discussing them. In fact, you and I were chatting before the show around the DNA test I took maybe a decade or so back. Seemed like an interesting sort of thing to do, to talk about for the New Zealand Tech podcast. And yet, we're being very much warned today around DNA tests and how those sort of entities can use that data maybe to make it very hard for you to get insurance in future and other sorts of things, depending on what's found, in that DNA, and that you don't necessarily completely control that once you've submitted it. Conveniently, when I emailed them back asking if they could link that info into my account, because it was just done in some sort of demo account, the firm involved could not actually find that DNA test or the data, and they said, "Oh, if you want to do it, start again."
Well, I was going to say that probably, the reason people did DNA testing early on, apart from the stuff about who's my dad and so on, there's a lot of it was, where did my family come from? Where's, and so on.
Yeah.
And I guess with a name like Spain, you might want to know if your family comes from the Iberian Peninsula.
Oh, that was exactly it. I was very curious.
Okay, so which is just perfectly understandable. But all that data is worth so much more to companies that can mine it and sell it to insurance companies than it is for those kind of purposes. And yet when 10, 12 years ago, when DNA testing was quite new, people were kind of aware there were privacy issues in there, but they thought, oh, no, it's not going to happen. It's just
we trust these big companies.
Yeah. And of course, no, that DNA testing company is worth so much more to sell that information to people like insurance companies and so on. I'm just being hypothetical here, but it can even lead to things like your DNA will tell you that you're susceptible to certain diseases, which are expensive to treat. And so there'll be no more medicine for Mr. Spain because he's got some piece of DNA or whatever.
Just let him die.
Yeah, well, it's not. Well, look, in our healthcare system, that's not necessarily going to be a problem, but it would be a problem in the US healthcare system where everything is private and people are worried about their private insurance and so on, and their private insurance can be cancelled. So there are those issues, which are really quite, they can be a matter of life and death. And yet, it seemed just a bit of fun to know where your family came from.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because that same information, could potentially help you, if you're aware early, and then you can get the right sort of treatment. So it does highlight the challenge that we have with the trustworthiness of large tech firms, or I guess businesses in general. They can come in with one approach, but then if you're not really, really sure that your data is 100% safe, then it can get used in inappropriate ways. So certainly something to keep a watch on. I would like to think we'll land up with some companies that are very privacy oriented, that will handle this well, and be very useful for those who are wanting to maybe get a jump on potential health issues later on in life, and prepare themselves.
Yeah, the problem with that though is that it's in the history of the the last 20 years or so, there's been a number of cases where there have been companies that have been really good on privacy. Then they go bankrupt. And the assets are up for sale. And
and I guess that's what we're dealing with at the moment, isn't it, with 23andMe? So yeah. Okay, now another topic that some will have heard about is this situation with a youngster, a teenager, who got really obsessed with an AI chatbot, and unfortunately, led to them, passing away. This has led to a court case against Character.AI, who produce this chat leveraging Google's technology. So Google are also, being sued as part of this. And I saw there was an article just yesterday, actually from the Daily Mail. This just kind of came up in my Googling, and the headline caught my attention. It said, "I tried the sinister AI bot guiding children into suicide and sex. What happened will make your skin crawl." Now, I won't go into all the details of it, but to me, there's a reminder here from a parenting perspective, from a perspective of utilizing technology, that we need to be aware of how technology is sort of getting used by youngsters, and whatever age you're at, learning to recognize that there can be a good side and a bad side to technology, and we have to be more and more wise than probably we ever did in the past, because of the possibilities that these platforms are opening up.
I had to write a profile of myself for something not so long ago, like in the last few months, and they wanted my thoughts about technology, and as having been a journalist covering it for so long, and I wrote words to the effect of, after 40 years of covering technology, I'd like to think that my mind is skeptical about some of the claims that I hear, but the line between being skeptical and being cynical is pretty thin at times. And where I feel possibly a bit cynical, we just talked a moment ago about how Meta were taking some responsibility over facial recognition. But some of these AI companies need to step up and take some responsibility for what they're putting out. And I get the impression that there's such an AI gold rush right now that responsibility is kind of like the last thing on anyone's mind. It's getting that. It's still about getting that venture capital in. It's still about getting building the momentum and so on, and whatever it takes. And I think there's an element of that out there, and there's going to be casualties. I mean, it's a tragic story, right? And I'm sure there must be something a little more wrong than just a chatbot talking to someone for a child to take their own life like that. But on the other hand, and of course, given the huge numbers, I mean, we're talking probably tens or hundreds of millions of people using this technology. So there's always going to, so 1 in 100 million is, well, it's tragic, but it's kind of just noise in the statistics as well. It's not noise for that family, but it's noise in the overall statistics. But there needs to be, I think there certainly needs to be more in the way of warnings about using this technology. I'd quite like it if you were to every so often get a warning from whatever AI engine that you're using. Well, come on, Bill, don't take me too seriously. I'm an AI bot. It's not. This is not gospel. This is the wisdom of lots of other people, but they're not always right. And you don't ever hear that. It's kind of presented like it's factual, and it's presented like it's come down Mount Sinai on tablets of stone. And it's just not. And so I think more responsibility from the AI companies is really called for here. And horrible though this case is, you know, I think that might actually stick some responsibility into the system if they do get sued for a huge sum.
Yeah, look, one of the benefits of these things getting that public attention is that it can lead to a change.
Yeah.
And you know, and the court case, definitely can have a positive flow on. Now, Zoom and AI avatars. This is.
How do you think this is going to end, Paul?
So the concept is that Zoom will let you have an AI avatar that you're, can basically join meetings on your behalf. Look, I can see some scenarios for AI driven bots that we chat to and so on. I gotta say I'm not particularly sure this is something that everyone's going to be jumping up and down with excitement. Now, it does work with, I think, only with Zoom's clips feature. And so, I haven't delved into kind of all the ins and outs of it. And it's more sort of, I guess, with the current iteration of the technology is kind of saying, well, they're a step closer to letting, your AI avatar, attend a meeting for you. But they will let you create an AI avatar of yourself that you can use to sort of send brief messages out, I guess, internally to your team. So, you do it by recording a bit of a video of yourself. Then it makes up an avatar that looks and sounds like you. And, at this stage of the iteration, you can, write a message that you want the AI avatar to say, and you have it doing all of the, the talking for you. You don't have to record anything. And then you use that Zoom's clip feature to kind of, push it out. But it sort of seems like the start of a slippery slope there.
Well, it certainly does. I mean, I think I'll get my avatar to talk to your avatar.
Yeah.
But okay, so I can just predict what's going to happen here, right? One of the first times this will get used will be at one of those all hands meetings where people are sacked, right? And some cowardly senior executive will send an avatar to give people the bad news rather than do it themselves. I mean, and how do you think that's going to go down?
Well, I guess what you could do there. I mean, you look at some of these big companies, the big tech firms, right? They might lay off 5,000 people at a time. Yeah. So you could use this sort of tool to send a semi-personalized, fake empathetic message.
But what's wrong with that? What's wrong with sending them a text message saying you're sacked and your access is cut off to the building and the system, which is what happens now.
Yeah. Well, you could do the fake empathy by sending them one of these messages from the CEO. So you think that could happen?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what will happen. I mean, I'm sorry. I was saying earlier about being cynical and skeptical of this kind of thing. It's going to be used in horrible ways. It really is. But the real thing is that the one underlying thing here is that we're starting to delve down into some of the processes that go on in businesses. If there are meetings that you don't actually need to be at, which you can send an avatar to, well, perhaps it shouldn't be a meeting. Perhaps it should be an email, or it's. And so, I mean, I can see it's going to get used, but there's something just kind of off about the whole thing, isn't there?
Yeah. But look, this is the nature. We're always trying to push for a bit more productivity, a bit more benefit from our technology, and this is the way that tech companies tend to sort of justify their price rises and their differing things, or why you need the next version. I mean, it is interesting to look at how different companies are approaching it. and which of these mechanisms are really going to stick? What's going to be really useful to us? Look, I think, genuinely, Zoom having their AI companion add-on that's coming. I think it's around an extra 20 New Zealand dollars per month. There will be capabilities of that are that are super useful in getting a summary of a meeting afterwards. You didn't take notes, or getting a summary of a meeting that you weren't able to attend because you're under the weather, or another meeting, and so on.
I think you're right. I think it can be used wisely. Do I think it will be used wisely is another question. And that's kind of the problem I have with it. Look, I found the one thing that AI really does for me is it makes up for the shortcomings in things like Google search. So if I want to find a complex piece of information, if I want to find, say, something which is like which would be 2 or 3 steps in search to get the full picture, and I can just ask the AI to go and do that, and to marry some bits and pieces together and to follow logic, so that I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but there are times when you want to check some facts and you want to, the question is just too complicated to put in a simple Google search. It does a great job, but you then have to go back through every step of that and check that the numbers are right. And I did this just the other day. I did this to check some facts in a story that I was writing, because I interviewed someone, and I was listening back to it, and I couldn't quite hear the numbers they were saying. So I went back to the source material to get the numbers, and it was just too hard delving into the source material to get that information out. So then I went to ChatGPT and I asked it, I forget the exact nature of the query, but I said, I want to get this source material, I want to know the numbers, and I want you to show me the reference where you found that information. And it was taking me ages to do that with Google search.
Yeah,
that's productivity. That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's great if you get the right result.
Yeah.
And I may have shared in recent weeks around my experience at Las Vegas airport, and they've got a bit of a complicated scenario with their terminals, and I didn't realize how complicated it was, but I got given effectively the wrong information, and went to the wrong terminal, and then my family arrived and they were at the other terminal, so then I went back again, and I'd lent into AI to save the time and to make things easier, and I'd even double queried it to, just, are you sure? Here's a bit more info, here's the exact flight number, and so on. And anyway, so there can be things, nuances that AI doesn't necessarily bring through. Just in the same way you can get that when you're chatting to a person who doesn't give you the full detail, and then there are the mistakes. One thing I do find interesting is we hear about sort of Zoom launching their add-on from an AI perspective coming through. Of course, Microsoft have got their varying Copilot options, which you can pay for extra. And alongside of it, we've got Apple, who are saying, hey, we're going to give you all of this stuff. We're going to guarantee your privacy, and it's going to be free with your Apple device, whether that's a modern MacBook or iMac, your phone, your iPad. And I'm really curious how that actually ends up playing out, because some of the capabilities that I see them coming through within this sort of next wave from them are capabilities that are, they're competing with what Microsoft are charging, around $50
it is
a
a
month.
I looked at Copilot. It's a lot. Look, it's a lot for individuals. Probably not too much for corporate buyers, because they'll be buying them.
No, it's around $50 in New Zealand.
What, even if you're buying by the thousands?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you got to buy for the whole year as well with Microsoft.
No,
You can't just buy
saw
it for
that.
a month.
Look, I think there's two things going on. I think one is for now, Apple's putting value add into its products. I mean, it's
got a cost for them, right?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, Apple kit is priced at the high end of the range generally, but it's not out of touch with the prices you pay for other kit. But you can argue that there's things in it that make that extra worthwhile. Like the integration between phone and I don't care what anyone says, the integration between Apple products is better than the integration between an Android this and a and a Windows that and so on. It's always going to be better. So some of that value is tied up in that integration and ease of use, and I think that's the thinking initially for this. But what I think down the track is that your iCloud or your music subscription or whatever, there'll be something in that there'll be some part of the AI package which will become another subscription, because that's starting to be where Apple's real profits are then, because there's not much more of a market to sell phones to. There's not much more of a market to sell laptops to. There are replacements, and the replacement cycle is now much longer than it was. So where's the money going to come from? It's going to come from adding services. And if we can get people hooked on this level of AI integration now, then when we come up with like something that does a bit more, then $5, and it's going to be $5 a month. It's not going to be $50 a month like Copilot, but it's going to be $5 a month, which 1.2 billion people worldwide are going to pay. It's
either that or they end up building out their other subscriptions a little bit more, and they make it look enticing, but then a very high percentage of people sign up for a flow-on subscription. Now, a couple of other sort of topics that this all bleeds into. We've seen, reporting on musicians and actors and academics. In fact, the last article I saw on it was saying 11,500 stars of the music, literature, screen, and stage had put their names to a statement, and there may be some newer data on that, because it's probably a lot more now. Really, pushing back on the unlicensed use of creative works for training generative AI, and this, saying this is a major unjust threat to the livelihoods of people, but behind these varying types of content.
I'm affected by this. If I go to any of the big search engines, any of the big AI engines, material on my website is on there. It's on them. I checked out with the there was a site which tells you how much of your material is in, I forget which AI, I think it might be Google's AI engine, how much of the material on my website is in their AI engine. And it's about 80% of the material on my website. And if I query the search the AI engines about the material that's on my site, I will see things that I've written coming up in that. I don't get a penny from them. Oh, the other thing I can see is I can see their bots visiting my site as well. Their bots scraping the site. I don't get a penny. I don't get anything. And in fact, it's costing me money, because people will be buying or using that information and not hiring me to do it. So I'm in that position, and I'm nothing like as rich as the guy who started ABBA, who's in this list.
Yes,
and I know that
he'll probably be okay, right?
Yeah, and I think the remaining members of Queen are in that list as well, and so on. And they're probably doing all right for money. Well, I could do with some of that revenue too. And it's the incredible thing is that these companies, specifically, I'm thinking of Microsoft. Microsoft made this huge thing over the years about people stealing software and stealing intellectual property. But somehow their logic is it's perfectly okay for them to steal my intellectual property to stick in their bloody AI system. It's outrageous, really.
Yeah. Well, there was that interview earlier on in the year, I think with Sundar Pichai, who heads up Alphabet Google.
Yeah.
And it was put to him that OpenAI was taking content off YouTube, and he seemed pretty unimpressed, right?
Yeah.
As that was how they were feeding their generative AI. systems for creating video. But then, we've got all the flip sides of Google being in a similar camp. In fact, one of the articles I read said last month that Google have called for a relaxation of restrictions on UK approach to dealing with text and data mining, and they're saying, hey, loosen this stuff up, and of course they are, when they're the one that benefits.
I mean, I don't really want to get into this story, but Kim.com faces 25 years in the slammer for doing exactly the same thing. It's outrageous.
It's a crazy world in which we live, Bill Bennett. Now, lastly, there was some news coming through that OpenAI have a new model coming, a new AI model called Orion. Some media was saying, hey, this is due to hit by December. But I think there's also been some commentary back from OpenAI and saying, well, that's not necessarily 100% accurate. What have you read on this? And,
I read exactly that earlier today.
Do you think that's going to be a big game changer when it does come? I mean, we seem to be getting these iterations that on certain things it's they're more there. They can be more obvious. In certain cases, but not necessarily across the board.
My experience is that when the models are upgraded, they are getting better, but we're not seeing huge leaps ahead in how much better they're getting. But they do get better. My guess is that OpenAI probably started talking to people about having it out this year, and something's come up, and it's just been put on the back burner. But the thing about software is, and the thing about this kind of software is you don't have a deadline. It's not like you've got to get it out. You don't have to get you have to get an iPhone out before Christmas. You don't have to get a new AI model out at any time, really, unless your competitors are up to things. So if the competition's about to move, then okay, we'll wheel this out. But otherwise, they can wait until they got it ready. And I think that's probably what's going on. They're just ironing the bugs out and so on.
Yes, I think that there's a denial that it'll be out this year, but it's on the way. Now, before we wrap up, one thing that looked interesting is the opinion piece that that you've shared around sort of a better way of getting Google to support New Zealand media, because we're currently in this place where a lot of news outlets get traffic from.
Exactly.
So I couldn't quite get my head around it. Now people can go to billbennett.co.nz and sort of read your story for the full breakdown. But in summary, what are you suggesting is the alternative?
The problem, as you stated, the problem is that the idea of what it amounts. I mean, the government hate you calling it a link tax, but it is a link tax, right? And it hasn't really worked elsewhere. There is something like that in Australia, but Facebook has fought back everywhere. And in fact, in a lot of countries now, Facebook has simply stopped linking to news rather than pay anything. They just say, well, okay, we won't do that anymore. And it's really cost the news media a lot where that's happened. And Google is starting to flex its muscles over it the same way. And also, Google does actually provide money for the media in other ways. And it's saying now, well, if you go ahead with this law, we'll stop all that. Because this will, because they hold all the cards in any negotiation. They hold every single card. But here's the thing, those big tech companies They don't pay taxes in New Zealand, or they do. They pay minimal tax. Not even 1% of revenue goes in tax, and we have a system where the telcos have to pay in for a levy, which is used to pay for public good things like the 111 service and so on. And in the past, it's been used to build out rural broadband. And they just pay a percentage of revenue into a fund called the Telecommunications Development Levy. Well, we could have a media development levy, and anyone who is in the digital space who earns revenue off the back of media in New Zealand can pay into a levy fund, and that money could then be used to pay for more journalists and more reporting and so on. Because the other problem with the way that law is set up is that the money doesn't necessarily get to the coalface in the media industry. I mean, it can do, but I mean, in Australia, basically, a lot of that money has been just used to make News Corporation more profitable. The ABC used their money to pay for more journalists in regional Australia. But if you've got a levy that's run that way, then the people operating the levy have some kind of say over how the money's spent that's raised as well.
Is there an approach, Bill, that would be similar to, let's say, the music industry, right? If you go for a swim at your local swimming pool and they're piping music over, or you're in a retail store, right?
Yeah.
Then there's a
performing rights,
performance rights kind of fees and so on that go back, and it's like, hold on, this is somebody's music that they've produced. You're now playing it to the advantage of your store, your swimming pool, your whatever it is, and that goes back. And sure, if you're a smaller artist, you might not see a cent, but there's a point at which that ends up putting money into musicians' pockets.
Yeah, look, yes. I mean, I'm talking about a long, long time ago. My friend of my father's actually worked as a he wasn't poor, but he was no longer famous. His professional musician days were over, and he was just like living on royalties. But he said the money that came in from the performing rights really made a difference. It was a difference between having a comfortable retirement and not. And it's the same sort of thing. Yeah, it's to the swimming pools and to the ice rinks and wherever they're playing that music, it's not a lot of money. I don't know. I mean, maybe it is today, but in those days, it certainly wasn't a lot of money. But when you collect all that up from all those places and divvy it up and share it out, for an individual performer, it's reasonable.
All right. Well, thanks, Bill. Great to have you back on the New Zealand Tech Podcast. Folks are wanting to tap into a little bit more of your content. They can duck across to billbennett.co.nz.
Yep.
Anywhere else where they should?
That's the main place I am now. You can find me on Blue Sky and Mastodon. I still have an account on Twitter, but it's pretty much don't use it.
Yeah.
That's mostly where I am nowadays.
Okay, that's good. Well, thanks again. And of course, thank you to our show partners, Gorilla Technology, HP, 2 Degrees, Spark, and 1NZ. We appreciate their support. Look, if you've been catching the live stream, of course, worth tapping in and making sure that you're also getting access to the audio podcast via your favorite audio app, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And of course, if you're listening to the audio podcast, do look out for us wherever you catch streaming content. So you can follow myself, Paul Spain, on LinkedIn for the streams. And then we're also across Facebook, YouTube, and X. So, that's where to find us. In fact, actually, for the streams on X, I think with the changes that Musk has put in place, you have to follow me directly to get the live streams. Those are no longer coming through on the NZ Tech Podcast account, as far as I'm aware anyway. So, thanks everyone. We'll catch you again next week. See ya.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.